All right. Hey everyone, good afternoon. Welcome to workshop number 4, Finding a Place for Faith in Sexual Violence Advocacy. Our presenter today, our lead presenter is Emily Bernath. She is the award-winning author of the Broken Lenses series. As a rape survivor herself, her life quickly hit rock bottom with constant feelings of both hopelessness and worthlessness. And being open about her experience, it became apparent to her how many other people's experience similar feelings. Through rediscovering her faith, Emily has found freedom from the condemnation in this world. She desires to help others find that same freedom and embraces each opportunity she gets to do so. Emily serves on the board of Reveal to Heal, a nonprofit dedicated to preventing all forms of child sexual abuse and helping survivors heal from its effects. When she's not writing, she spends her time tutoring, volunteering with her church's youth group, playing softball, and making latte art. Thank you, Emily. We're looking forward to your presentation.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and thank you all for joining. If you guys want to introduce yourselves in the chat too with your name, and I would love to know how you guys all work with survivors as well. You know, there's many parts of a survivor's healing journey, and we all play a role. So yeah, I'd love to hear that. Yeah, let's get started, shall we? So, the topic today will be finding a place for faith in sexual violence advocacy. And, you know, we all are working with survivors on a daily basis, right? Sexual assault is a very complex thing to heal from, and there's many different areas of healing. 4 of those main areas being the mental aspect, the physical, the emotional, and today I want to focus on the spiritual. So thank you for the introduction. I'll give you all a little bit more about myself to start out. I am honored to speak to you all today because I'm actually from Ohio. I do live in Salt Lake City now, but I was born and raised in Ohio. And it was in that part of my life of living in Ohio that I went through sexual assault myself and was going through that healing process. So the state has a very near and dear place to my heart, and I thank you all for doing work in an advocacy capacity here in the Buckeye State. I graduated from the University of Toledo with a degree in chemistry, so go Rockets if there's any fellow Rockets out there. And following that, I moved out to Utah and got my master's degree at the University of Utah. So this picture here is me moving out to Utah. And one of the reasons why I'm talking about faith today is because faith and spirituality played a huge role in my own healing from being a survivor. You know, I personally will identify as a non-denominational Christian. I know there's lots of different faiths out there, but that's what I personally identify with. And it was in this journey of healing that led me to writing the Broken Lenses series. So, you know, a survivor needs a community. And that was one thing I really didn't have when I was healing myself and was looking for it. And I found that in church and with a relationship with God. And so I don't separate those 2 areas of my life because being a survivor very much led to all the work that I'm doing today. And I'm very honored to be speaking with you all. So just a quick overview of the agenda for our workshop today. I first just want to go over what is faith in general, just kind of set a foundation, see what you all think, and hear from you guys. And then we're going to see what impact sexual assault has on faith, how faith can play a role in a survivor's healing, and then how does this all apply to us as advocates? How can we use this in our work every day with survivors? So the first being, what is faith? So if y'all can chime in the chat, I would love to see just kind of how you all would define faith in general. Yeah, so we have any responses here of faith? What is faith? I can't see the chat here. There we go. Open-heartedness, faith is hope, believe in the unseen, faith is guidance. All right. trusting a high power. I like it. Yes. Awesome. So I don't expect that any of you have read my books, but I'm big in definitions. And so I just want to start off with, yeah, a relationship. Good. Yeah. We're just going to start off today with just the basic definition of what faith is. And Merriam-Webster.com defines it as complete trust. All right. So I'm going to assume that most of you are sitting in a chair, right? And in order for you all to sit in that chair, you probably had faith that the chair was going to hold you, right? You trusted that that was going to hold your weight and that you weren't going to fall through. Granted, I have fallen through a chair that I sat in before, but for the most part, we trust the chair and it's going to hold us. And for that, we place faith in it and we sit down, right? This may seem like a silly example, but it applies to really anything that we place faith in. If we're placing faith in it, we have this complete trust that it's going to come through for us. Yeah. So when we're looking at this concept of faith and trust, what impact does that really have from a sexual assault standpoint, right? Well, the word trust means assured reliance on the character, ability, or strength of someone or something, or truth of someone or something, right? So when we're talking about being a survivor and working with survivors, majority of the time, statistics say 8 out of 10 rapes are committed by someone the victim knows. And in juvenile cases, that number jumps to 93% of reported cases, right? So if we think about it from this aspect, we have 80 to 93% of the people that we're working with on a daily basis that just had a complete violation of their trust, right? It's someone that they had placed faith in. They had belief. This person had guided them, they had a relationship with them, and all of a sudden, everything that they knew previously had been taken from them. And I know for me personally, I was part of this group. It was someone I knew well and someone I trusted. And for me, I didn't know what to believe anymore. I didn't know who to trust. And quite honestly, I was really mad at God. So, I write faith books now, and I like to think I have a pretty good relationship with God, but at the point of the incident, I was really mad. Why did you do this to me, God? What did I do to deserve this? I don't know. Can I trust you? Who can I trust? And I know I'm not alone in that, and that a lot of survivors are asking this question, right? And there's this gap, this spiritual gap that survivors are experiencing after going through sexual assault. And so there is very much, like I said, the physical, I felt like my body was gross. There's the mental, am I worthy of, a good relationship again? There's the emotional, I'm just worthless and no one's going to want to get to know me. And I lost a lot of friends. There was a lot of that gap loss. And there was very much that mental, physical, emotional, but it was also that spiritual component. What do I believe? What do I trust? I don't know. And it really took a community and advocates, maybe not certified trained advocates, but people who filled that role of an advocate in my life to help me in that spurring that healing process on. And I believe, we all want to be those people for the survivors that we're working with on a daily basis, right? So what does this trust consist of, and how can I, as an advocate, be someone that they can trust? Because at its core, sexual assault is a betrayal of trust. And most survivors find it difficult to trust other people as well as themselves and their own perceptions, right? So we know that I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here with people who work with survivors when I say that sexual assault is one of the most underreported crimes, right? There is a lot of reasons that that our survivors that we're working with do not report. And this graph here shows some of the main ones, right? They didn't believe that the police could do anything to help. They didn't want the perpetrator to get in trouble. Might be.
That you're confused, Emily. Sorry to interrupt. There's like black boxes over your slide. One of them went away. Now it's back.
Oh, is that better?
Part of it. There's still now. Yeah, that's a lot better.
Okay. Yeah, so there's a lot of reasons that victims do not report, right? And a lot of that, you know, they believed it wasn't important enough to report. They feared retaliation. They believed the police wouldn't do anything to help. And if we look at all of these reasons, a lot of them stem from a lack of trust in someone or something, right? And so I'm a data nerd at heart. Like I said, I got my degree in chemistry. I've been a math and science tutor for a decade now. And so I like numbers, and I broke down a little bit of how this relates to trust, right? These reasons of why victims don't report. So again, we have the definition here: trust, assured reliance on the character, ability, or strength or truth of someone or something. And so I just made this little table here and, you know, took those reasons from the previous slide and how that could possibly be a breakdown of trust, right? So if someone fears retaliation, that reflects on the character of, like, there's some sort of character attribute to the person relating to that fear, right? What are they afraid of? Who knows what these people are capable of, right? And that fear is very real for a lot of people. You know, if they believe the police wouldn't or couldn't do anything, that communicates a lack of trust on the ability of the police itself. Now, I'm not here to say I'm anti or pro police, whatever. Like, I fully believe that there's a lot of people out there doing great work to their you know, utmost ability, right? But we can't deny the fact that there's a lot of survivors out there that are questioning the ability of people that they would potentially report to. And that is a breakdown of trust. We have that they believed it was a personal matter, or they believed it wasn't important enough to report. Those, to me, speak to a breakdown of truth. So for me, a big part of my writing is that seen in John 8:32, that when we know the truth will set us free, right? And if any survivor out there is believing that what happened to them is a personal matter, that is 100% not true, right? It is never the victim's fault. But that doesn't mean that they don't fully believe that, and that's their, like, reality and their experience. I know, because I've been there. Like, our world can be a pretty, you know, dark place at times, and it's really good at victim blaming. And that, as a result, you know, kind of gets survivors questioning, like, wow, maybe it was my fault, right? We as advocates know that's not true, and we need to give them a reason to also know that that's not true, right? That they can trust that it wasn't their fault, and they can trust that it is important to report should they feel that's the necessary action to take, right? So we know that there's these breakdowns of trust, and that these survivors don't report, and that's a problem. So I want to go over, there's a talk here, coincidentally also a guy from Utah, a TED talk on building trust. And I think, you know, in the video, he's talking a little bit about it from a business aspect. And he'll talk about a guy named John in the video. And John really is serving as us, as the advocate in his story. And yeah, so let's just take a listen at this. And yeah.
About 20 years ago, some colleagues and I were sitting in an office. We're business professors, and we're talking about what it takes to be a successful business. We were talking about the essence of success and what causes success. And the more we talked about it, the more we realized the thing that causes business success more than anything else are relationships. Relationships between businesses, between employees and bosses, between companies and customers, between suppliers and companies. It was relationships that happen to be the essence that drives company performance, efficiency, effectiveness. And the more we talked, we decided we've got to understand what these relationships are and what really drives these relationships. We talked about the relationships. We came to the conclusion that the essence of relationships is trust. It's trust. We got quite excited. We thought, oh man, that's the essence of all relationships. We got to find out what this trust thing is. And we started reading literature. We started looking up what is trust. And what we found was a mess. There was no clear definition of trust. It was used in a myriad of different ways and defined in a myriad of different ways. We didn't understand trust. Now, as researchers, that got us kind of excited. There's an area that we can really research. But we found that people said, I trust you. I trust you. What does that mean? We didn't know. We didn't know. So we began to investigate what trust really is. And we decided we'd start by looking at world leaders, some of the most influential leaders in world history. Obviously, if you're an influential world leader, you must be trusted. Rankit.com on the internet ranked world leaders, the most influential leaders of all time. Alexander the Great was ranked as number 1. It's amazing that Napoleon is ranked number 3, ahead of George Washington, Abraham Lincoln, and Winston Churchill. Amazingly, Adolf Hitler is ranked number 17, ahead of Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin. How does that reflect on trust? What does that mean for trust? Does that mean that Hitler is more trusted than Abraham Lincoln? What is trust and what drives trust? In fact, we started looking at companies, and Entrepreneur.com lists the most trusted brands, the most trusted companies. And these are some of the most trusted brands. And many of these we use. This means we trust Nike. We trust Coca-Cola. We trust Southwest Airlines. How do you know when you trust Southwest Airlines with your luggage, they're not going to lose it? How do you know when you pick up that next can of Coke, it's not going to make you sick? How do you know when you open up a license agreement from Apple? This is amazing. I talk about trust all over the world. And I've asked over and over again, how many of you read the license agreement before you agree? This is a license agreement for iTunes. It's 229 pages. And I'm not going to even ask how many have read it, because most of us just agree to it. We don't know what we've agreed to, but we've agreed to it. Why? Because we can trust Apple. We can trust them. So what is trust? Trust is a willingness to be vulnerable. You choose to take risk and be vulnerable to the other party. That means if I say, I trust you, it means I'm willing to be vulnerable to you. I'm willing to take that risk. It's vulnerability and risk that drive trust. So how does this work? Let me start with a story. My fiance and I were driving in Wyoming, in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. And we looked up on the mountain, and there was a ski resort. And people were jumping off the mountain and paragliding off the mountain. These are the Tetons. These aren't little guys. These are real mountains. And we looked up there and thought, should we? Should we? And we thought, let's give it a shot. And we drove over there. All right. And we go up to the business and say, all right, tell us about paragliding. First person we saw was this guy right here, John. John comes up and basically says, I'm going to take you. We're going to jump off the mountain together. Now, you don't have any time. You've got to make a snap judgment. And there were, my fiance and I, we looked at this guy and says, we really want to take that risk? Do we really want to be vulnerable to this guy? I got a little sidebar here. When I prepared this TED Talk, I had to get his image, get his permission to use the image in this TED Talk. He had to take a risk in me. It was fun. I turned the tables. Not a lot different than jumping off a mountain. So, so the bottom line is here we are, and we had to look at John. Do we trust him? We're trusting him with our lives. We're going to jump off a mountain with this guy. Am I willing to be vulnerable to him? What drives my willingness to take a risk in John? Well, the first thing that drives trust is something called propensity. A propensity to trust, a propensity to take on that vulnerability and risk. Everybody is born with a propensity to take risk. It's driven by geography, it's driven by family, it's driven by upbringing, it's driven by society. Edelman Trust Barometer is on the internet, and they went around the world and they found different levels of trust throughout the world. The red areas on the map are areas that don't have as good trust as the blue areas. And so is it all driven by our upbringing? Is it all driven by our family? I can tell you no, because a family came up while my fiance and I were talking to John. And it was amazing. Here they were from the same town, from the same home, the same family. And some members of the family said, no way, I'm not going to jump off that mountain. Other members of the family said, let's do this thing. So we know it's more than propensity. We know it's more than propensity. It's more than just that innate willingness to trust and take risks that we're born with. What we found in our research are there are three major drivers to trust. Three drivers, three reasons we trust. And the amazing thing is, it's our perception of that company. It's our perception of that other person that drives these drivers. The first of the three drivers is ability. Can that person do what they say they can do? Are they able to perform what they say they can perform? Do they have that ability? All right, there's John. All right, there he is. Does he have the ability? Well, he comes out and he's wearing that black helmet, kind of unshaven. He's got that jump off the mountain look. And I got to tell you, I looked at him and I thought, you know, if he were wearing a pink helmet or a yellow helmet, I wouldn't believe it. But he's wearing a black helmet. He's got the swagger. He looks like he's jumped off a mountain before. And I said to him, John, have you done this before? He says, yeah. He says, I've done it for 20 years. And I says, any deaths in that time? Any broken bones? And he said, no, 20 years, safe. Oh, John's got the ability. He's got the ability. And I began to believe in John. Now, here's something funny about ability. It's situation specific. Would I trust John to fix the engine in my car? John doesn't look like a guy that could fix my engine. I wouldn't trust John to fix the engine in my car. He could jump off a mountain. He had that ability. So ability is not generalizable. It's specific to the thing that you're trusting them to do. I would trust John to jump off a mountain, not fix my car, okay? Ability. I will trust them if they can do what they say they will do, okay? If they're able to do it. The second driver is benevolence. Do they care about me? Now here's John. I know he can jump off the mountain, but man, I'm telling you what, I saw those paragliders coming down and they were corkscrewing down. And I saw some pretty dang green people after they got off the mountain. And I knew John could cause me a lot of discomfort. You know, we'd survive, but I might not wish I'd survived. And so, does John care about me? Does John care? And it was interesting because we talked to him, and I began to feel like, yeah, we began to connect a little bit. We began to connect, and John, I felt like, cared about me. Now, here's the interesting thing here. If they care about me, it's not driven by their ego, okay? They don't care about me for their own gratification. They really care about me. And if they really care about me, I'm more apt to trust. A couple examples here of people that were known for their caring. Abraham Lincoln once said, "To ease another's heartache is to forget one's own." He cared about people. A contemporary of Abraham Lincoln was Walt Whitman. And in their writings, they kind of blended each other's names very often in their writings. And Walt Whitman once said, "You know, Abraham Lincoln is my man. But more importantly, I am Abraham Lincoln's man." He believed in the benevolence of Abraham Lincoln. And people that followed Abraham Lincoln did so. Yeah, he had ability. But they cared, they sensed that Abraham Lincoln cared about them. The amazing thing is, if it's all I have is ability and no benevolence, I'm an assassin. Assassins have lots of ability, and they don't really care. Abraham Lincoln cared. Want an example of an assassin? Caligula. Caligula, raised by his uncle. His uncle wanted two people to share the emperor role in Rome. The first thing Caligula did was kill his cousin, kill the competition so that he was the sole leader. He drained the national treasury. One time he was in the Colosseum, and they ran out of criminals to put with the lions. So he just grabbed some spectators and put them down there as well. He was not a man with a lot of benevolence. People feared him. As a result, you couldn't trust him. You couldn't trust him. Ability and benevolence drive your willingness to take risks. But there's one more factor. That factor is integrity. Integrity is having a set of values that other people agree with. You live by those values, and other people agree with those values. Now let's go back to Adolf Hitler. If you know the history of Adolf Hitler in the 1930s served a little time in jail. And while he was in jail, he wrote a book called Mein Kampf, My Struggle. In that book, Adolf Hitler laid out his values, his belief system. Now, most of us wouldn't agree with those values and that belief system. Believe me, that book was a bestseller in Nazi Germany. And there were people that believed in his values. They believed he had integrity. And believe me, Adolf, he lived his values. We wouldn't believe in his values, and so we wouldn't trust Hitler. But there were people that did. Integrity means I have a set of values, I live those values, and you trust me because of those values, and you believe in those values. In other words, if you say you're going to be there, you're going to be there. If you say you're going to be honest, you're honest. If you say you're going to be trustworthy, courteous, you will be, and you agree with it. Not driven by ego, it's real. 3 factors then drive trust. Thomas More was known for his integrity. He was known for his integrity. He once said, "We speak of principles, but if the weather turns nasty, you up your anchor and move to where the weather is more calm and the fishing is better." Thomas More lived his principles. If you go to the Tower of London, there's a small church in the back corner, and Thomas More's body is in the floor of that church somewhere. He stood up against the King of England because he didn't agree with the King of England. And while everybody else changed their values to match the king, Thomas More did not. He stood by his values. He gave his life for his values and his principles. Thomas More was a guy you could believe. He lived his values. Thomas More could be trusted because he lived his values. The bottom line, 3 factors. 3 factors drive trust. Yeah, there's John again. And I'm not finished with him. 3 factors drive trust: ability, benevolence, and integrity. And it's your perception. It's your perception. And there's John, and there I am. Am I going to jump from the mountain? Am I going to jump from the mountain? Unconsciously, I'm thinking ability, benevolence, and integrity. Did I jump? Yeah, I jumped. I jumped. Yeah, it was great. I survived. I don't know that I'd have jumped if I couldn't believe him. If I wouldn't have believed him, if I wouldn't have trusted him, I don't know whether I could have jumped. As importantly, my fiance jumped. We jumped together. And it was phenomenal. If you want to improve your relationships, if you want to reduce your friction, if you want to improve people's perception of your trustworthiness, build their perception of your ability, benevolence, and integrity. And you will build trust. And believe me, we will have a happier society. Thank you.
Awesome. So, we're talking about how faith is demonstrated by complete trust. And we just watched that talk on how we can build trust and, as a result, restore a survivor's ability to have faith even. So yeah, with that, we'll jump into how can faith play a role in a survivor's healing? And I just want to address some of the highlights that were in that talk here. And are we still good with the chat?
Yep.
Yes. And okay, awesome. So a couple of things that he said is that the essence of all relationships is trust. And that trust is choosing to be vulnerable and taking risks. Now, when we're talking about this from a survivor standpoint, right? Like anyone who is coming to someone and sharing their story about sexual assault, that is as vulnerable as it gets, right? And what a survivor really needs when they're being vulnerable with us is they need someone that they can trust, right? Someone that they see cares, that benevolence, someone that, when they say they're going to help, they do it and they have that integrity, right? I know, speaking from my personal experience, I shared my story with what happened to people, and I did not receive that kind of feedback. I had people straight up tell me it was my fault. I had people questioning my actions and my words and my, and here I am trying to be vulnerable and sharing this experience with people who I thought I could trust. And all it did really was drive me further into a spiral of, what do I have faith in? I thought I trusted these people. I thought I trusted this person that hurt me originally, and all of this is just breakdown after breakdown. And I know I'm not alone. I know a lot of survivors, when they're open and vulnerable and sharing their story, that is absolutely what they're faced with. And that is the sad reality of our society today. And that's where we as advocates can step in and be the change, right? Do what we say we're going to do and build this trust with these survivors, because quite frankly, they need it. It is absolutely a necessary component to all survivors' healings. And, I think all too often our society just overlooks it too much. So yeah, those 3 main drivers of trust, right? How can we be people that have the ability to do what we say we're going to do, show them that we care, and, live with integrity. So like I said, when survivors share their story with us, they're being vulnerable and taking a risk. So already they're communicating that they are placing trust in us, right? So, that is extremely painful to do. When survivors are sharing their stories with us, it's causing them to relive something that was extremely painful, and it's not easy to share. And we absolutely need to be people who are willing to be vulnerable and communicate trust in return, right? make it as easy as possible for them to disclose their story with us, and show that we care, right? I think far too often we undermine the simple power that caring for people has. So yeah. So then how do we communicate this trust to survivors? And he touched on this in the video, but first and foremost, we believe them. And I cannot stress this enough, how important it is, the simple power of belief, right? So in the TED Talk, he mentioned, I don't know if I could have jumped if I didn't believe him, if he didn't believe John, right? And, I know from my own personal experience, especially when I told it was my fault, I knew they didn't believe me, right? But also when you're, I just feel like far too often we live in a society that's like coming from the side of, you need to prove to me that this actually happened to you, which I totally get. And there's absolutely people who report falsely, but that number is what, about 3%? I don't know the official statistic but from other conferences I've been to, it's been about 3% of all, reports are false. So what is that speaking to the 97% that are being vulnerable with us and telling the truth and just looking for some help when all they really first need to know is that they're believed and that their story is valid, right? So what makes belief so powerful? We have this cute picture here of this cat that believes it's a lion, right? The word belief means a state or habit of mind in which trust or confidence is placed in some person or thing. And so here we go with this trust thing again, right? By us placing our trust in these survivors and showing them that we care for them and want to help them, that in and of itself communicates belief, and that we are placing our trust in them and believing them. And really that's just, setting the foundation for their healing. So, right, how does sexual assault impact belief? Quite honestly, when someone is sexually assaulted, their concept of belief is shaken, because we had belief and trust in something and that was broken, and it causes us to question, I don't know what to believe anymore. And many survivors go through this, right? Especially because most assaults come from someone that the victim knew, they believed, and placed that trust in, and they're unsure of what to believe anymore. So absolutely plays a part in healing and restoration, right? It's not just, right, the physical and the mental, it's, this concept of how do I restore even knowing what to believe anymore. Believing a survivor when they share their experience with us is the beginning of establishing a relationship with them, right? We're going back to the beginning of that talk. He was talking about relationships, that in a business sense, but it also absolutely applies to our work with survivors as well. If we don't communicate that we believe and, believe them and that we're a person they can trust, there is no foundation for establishing a relationship with them. And at that point, how far are we going to be able to help them with their healing if we can't establish that relationship with them and communicate to them that we are a person they can trust? Our belief in a survivor, it makes for an environment that they can heal. When survivors share their stories, it requires them to be vulnerable, and this is extremely painful, right? And so, to be quite honest, if they can't see that we trust them, how can we expect them to trust us in return? I don't know if we can, right? And that's because they're the ones that are in this vulnerable spot. They've been extremely hurt. We're supposed to be there to help them. And if, we can't be a trustworthy person to them, yeah. Like I said earlier, I am a faith-based author. And so I just included a couple verses here that kind of reinforce this point, even just from a text standpoint, right? So, it's in one of the most popular Bible verses of all time, is that God so loved the world that he gave his son, that whoever believes in him, right? He wanted to know that he was a person we could trust and place belief in. And, you know, that is extremely important. It's not by anything that we did. It's strictly what was already done, and that we believe that, you know, this is a trustworthy source to find healing. Yeah, so just proof that, you know, God is speaking the same language as we are talking about here, as well as this concept of trust and belief. And this is where that healing starts. It's just, you know, simply that we believe them, right? So this is all great, right? What is faith? Faith is complete trust. What impact does it have? Well, it communicates that, you know, trust was broken. It needs to be restored. We don't know what to have faith in anymore. And how does this apply to us from an advocate standpoint, right? So we're working with these survivors every day, with these people who need that faith restored. So who are we, right? As advocates, is both a verb and a noun. So we act as an advocate for someone or something. In this case, you know, we're all acting as advocates for survivors of sexual assault. And we are people who support or promote the interests of a cause or group, right? And so, you know, there's multiple different groups of people who are survivors, right? It impacts, it's not specific to women, it's not specific to men, you know. I've seen a lot of workshops here focusing on the LGBT community. That's amazing. That is another group who needs our support, right? So all of these, you know, sexual assault doesn't care what a person looks like or what they identify as. Everybody, it affects everybody, whether it's yourself or someone you knew. I'm gonna bet all of us know or have been affected by it, right? So regardless of what group you're supporting or promoting, we are all advocates supporting the same cause, right? That, you know, are survivors of sexual assault. So yeah, as we're supporting these people and we're advocating on a daily basis, right? How do we create that safe space for survivors to show that we believe them and promote their interests? You know, I would love to hear some of your suggestions too, of how you guys create that space, because I think, you know, it looks different for a lot of us, but, you know, it's all the same goal, right? We want a safe space and we want survivors to know that they can trust us. So I would love to hear some of the things that you're doing on a daily basis in your work with survivors to create that safe space. If you want to chime in on the chat there. And while you do that, why is it important for us to create that safe space and show that we support them and promote our interests, right? Like, this is the main goal of healing. You know, we can't properly heal a wound unless it's in a space that supports it to heal, right? Like, I'm not gonna put, you know, dirt in an infected cut because that's gonna infect it more, right? And so how are we making sure that we're getting rid of that, you know, the toxicity of our world and all the, you know, the doubt and the shame and the victim blaming? How are we creating that safe space for these survivors? Here we have a couple of being willing to hear their experience without judgment. That is absolutely huge, right? Because I think, I mean, especially because we have such this, you know, this environment of that victim blaming environment is absolutely real, and survivors aren't dumb. They know that that's the kind of world that we live in. And so, yeah, why would I share if I know I'm just going to be judged for what happened to me, especially knowing that it wasn't my fault, right? Like, how painful is that to have to try to share something and get help on something that you know wasn't your fault, but you constantly are being told that it is. And it's not fair. And we have the power to change that culture. And, you know, it's all of us coming together, right, in each of our groups. We have another response here. Case managers, open door for listening to them at our shelter. Absolutely. The power of listening also underestimated, right? You know, how I was saying earlier, how people kept asking me questions, what happened here? Why did they do this? And don't get me wrong, there's absolutely a space for that. But I think, you know, to some degree, it needs to be done with discretion, because it was already painful enough for me to share like what I was already sharing. And if we're not careful to first listen and hear the survivor out, and all we're trying to do is get more information from them and try to figure it out ourselves, right? Like sometimes they don't need it figured out. They just need someone to sit with them and show that they care. And that, to me, wasn't presented right away. Eventually it was, but I think we just really underestimate the power of just being a body that's there to listen to them. And that in itself, you know, communicates trust, right? We're there, we're willing to take time. We show that they're worth our time, and there to support them. That's awesome. Thank you. Yes. So when we show survivors that we believe and support them, like I said, it allows them to continue to heal, right? It's not the healing itself, but it creates that safe space that allows them to feel comfortable opening up and continue healing. And that is super important, and I think far too often underestimated in our society. So the answer to how we show support to survivors, like I said, looks different for each of us, depending on our profession, depending on what group we're working with. But quite honestly, the one thing that we all have in common, and the one thing that we can't do, is nothing. If you all knew me, you would know that I am 100% action-oriented person. Like, faith without action is dead. And this is my personal favorite book of the Bible, but James, it says, if one of you says, go to them in peace, keep warm and well fed, but does nothing about their physical needs, what good is it? In the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. And, you know, we can absolutely, this applies in an advocate environment, right? You know, we're saying that we're a person that they can trust, they can place faith in us. And, you know, they're trusting us with, you know, being a person that they can go to in a time that they're hurting. And if they're doing that, you know, that, and we don't take action of any kind, you know, what does that show to them? It shows the lack of benevolence, right? That we don't care. But we all know that we do care, and that's why we're there to work with them. So what does it look like? Yeah, like, why is this important to take action? And what does it look like when we don't take action? There's a story here that says, why do you call to me and do not, Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say? As for everyone who comes to me and hears my words and puts them into practice, I will show you what they're like. They are like a man building a house who dug down a deep and laid the foundation on the rock. When the flood came, the torrent struck, and the house built could not shake it because it was well built. But the one who hears my words and does not put them into practice is like a man who built a house on the ground without a foundation. The moment the torrent struck that house, it collapsed, and its destruction was complete. Right? So what actions are we taking to show survivors that we care and ultimately are providing a platform or firm foundation to enable them to heal? I would love to hear practices that you guys involve in your daily life. Like, what are you doing to show that you care? Because I know you all do, or you wouldn't be here. People don't come to conferences like this if they don't care to hear how they can make a difference in this world. And I think, you know, we all have something that we can learn from each other. So if you guys have practices that you're implementing that are, you know, you find survivors are really taking well to, that you're showing that you care, I mean, feel free, share it in the chat, let us all know. And, you know, we're better when we learn from each other, right? You know, for me, a big one is just like what we were talking about earlier, is listening and not judging. And I think, you know, that comes with, you know, acceptance. They mentioned earlier that I'm an author. And my second book released a couple weeks ago. One of the chapters in it is talking about acceptance and belonging, like, you know, how we need to communicate to survivors that they do belong here, that nothing's wrong with them. We have a response here. Oh. Expressing care no matter who they are. That's right. Small group yoga. All right. I don't claim to be a flexible person myself, but I am definitely open to, you know, new experiences. And I lead some small groups myself, not yoga, but absolutely, you know, it is absolutely important to be people who are giving survivors a community of people and surrounding them with support, because it is an isolating and a lonely place. And that, yeah, having that be the part of the mission and vision, and most importantly, the practice. All right, awesome. Yes, so really, how does this safe space that we're talking about, these yoga groups, these small groups, this environment of listening and not judging, how does doing all of this create this space and allow for transformation, right? Because ultimately, we don't want the survivors to stay where they are, right? We don't want to judge them. We don't want to tell them, you shouldn't be feeling this way or you shouldn't be feeling that way. So we absolutely want to accept and know that they belong exactly where they are, but we also don't want them to stay there, right? We're there to care for them because we want to see them heal and we want to see them transform and we want to see them, you know, live the life that, you know, to the fullest, right? We don't want them to stay lonely and feel like no one cares about them and all these things that our world likes to, you know, place on survivors, that it's their fault, right? We don't want them to stay there, but that reality is true. We don't want to shame them for being there either. So yeah, how do we create this space and allow for this transformation? The word transform means to change in composition or structure, to change in the outward form or appearance of. So we have this little graphic of this caterpillar here. We all are well aware of the transformation of a butterfly, right? You know, we start off as a caterpillar here and it turns into a butterfly. You know, they all start out as caterpillars and that's not a bad thing, but who doesn't want to be a butterfly, right? So how do we transform and, you know, for, you know, lack of better terms, you know, find this beauty, resurface into, you know, our work with survivors on a daily basis. Yeah. So, you know, kind of like I was saying earlier, we don't have the power to transform the survivors or, so to speak, will them to transform. They're not bad if they're not transforming as fast as others, or they, you know, whatever, right? There's no blaming, there's no judging. Everybody's journey looks different. You know, for me, it took a couple of years before I really felt like my body was, you know, not gross, that I was a person worth getting to know. That definitely did not happen overnight, and it probably won't. But by creating that safe space for them and supporting them how they can, it creates that environment that they do feel comfortable exploring transformation in. So yes, I just want to thank you all for what you're doing. And yeah, I want to open it up for if you guys have any questions for me. Having a part, I see a comment here, having a part, oh, thank you, Karen. Having a part of being the mission and vision, and most importantly, the practice of their growth will be their own. We only have to create a safe space for that. And that starts with acceptance, whether they are a caterpillar, butterfly, or a moth. I agree. You know, we're going to have survivors that are in all parts of their healing journey that come to us, but acceptance is absolutely key. And a big one for me too is respect, right? Like when someone is sexually assaulted, like that is absolute like disrespect to its core, right? And we need to be people who show them respect and that they are worthy of being treated with respect, right? And that is absolutely plays a part in this whole spiritual healing. Oh, Zane, thank you so much. This has been helpful. Thank you for sharing. Oh, I appreciate it. Yes. So, and I appreciate you all for listening and having me here. Yeah, I think you all, I don't know what individually what you do, but I know we're all here doing great work for the same cause. And I just hope, that we can welcome this conversation of the spiritual aspect of a survivor's healing, right? Because it is absolutely very much a part. And I personally just don't see it implemented enough. What was your book title? My book title is, it's a Broken Lenses series. So the book that came out last week is the second book in the series. And it's called Seeing Others' Value in a World of Division. And the main aspect of that book really is when I see others as God sees them, with love, accept, respect, belonging. When I see them as that, it unites us, it brings us together. Versus when I see them the way the world tells me to, as different, as less than, as, not worthy, it divides us. And really that power of unity in division lays in each of our hands, and is absolutely applicable to our work with survivors, right? Like, talk about people feeling divided. Sexual assault survivors actually absolutely feel divided from their communities, from their families, from, they could have, like me, I lost most of my friendships because I knew at my core, I at least deserved to be treated with a little bit of respect, and I wasn't seeing it. And so I chose personally to break off those friendships, and it's really an isolating place. And I know I'm not the only survivor that's been in that isolating place. And that's not what we were created to live for, right? We were created for togetherness and community. And we have the power to bring that community in a survivor aspect. So yeah. Broken Lenses, Volume 2, Seeing Others' Value in a World of Division. That is the title. Do we have other questions? I don't know if people are allowed to unmute too, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely. Folks, feel free to unmute yourself if you want to ask verbally. I have a question.
Yeah.
What is your best advice for an advocate who is advocating for a survivor with who has some of these spiritual beliefs that are important to them, but the advocate themselves maybe not so much? What is the best advice in terms of connecting and building that faith and trust?
I think, I'm not going to say anyone's wrong for believing one certain thing or not the other, but also not making the survivor feel like that too. So like, yes, we're entitled to our own like spiritual, personal beliefs. But I think, not discouraging them from believing one certain thing or another either. And I will speak from my own personal experience. Like, yes, I did come to faith out of being a survivor and finding a community and going back to church and whatnot, but it wasn't because, and at the time I wouldn't have identified as someone who was like God was there in the sky, I guess, I don't know, but it wasn't something I lived my life for. So I guess I would have identified as the person you were just talking about. But really it wasn't them saying, you need to believe in God and he loves you. And, what really showed me that they cared and they believed was off of their actions, right? They listened to me. They cared about me. They didn't see me as less than when I saw myself as less than, and I could tell based on their actions. So really, it like Bible verses or anything like that wasn't brought into any of the conversations originally. You can just tell by people's actions. And so I think, we can be that as advocates too. Like, we don't have to sit there and, preach to them. We just have to be a person that is, shows respect and has some decency, for God's sake. You would think it's easier said than done, but our world doesn't seem to believe that. I guess, I don't know. It wasn't my experience anyway, and I know I'm not alone. but yeah, I would just say, you know, basic human values, treat others how you want to be treated. Like that goes a lot farther than people would care to admit. I don't know. Did that answer your question at all?
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Yeah. We have a question. How do you reconcile with the faith that led to abuse in your life? That did not lead to abuse in my life, personally. I do know that absolutely happens to people. With that, I would just say that, you know, it's my personal belief is that it's, you know, a relationship with God. And yes, the church exists, but we're all humans are broken and have, you know, our own sin and it, right. Obviously, what happened, and people use the name of God to justify their abuse. But one of my personal favorite verses is John 10:10, is that the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy, but I have come to bring life. And I actually use that as a yardstick in my life with like anything that I'm doing. I'm like, if I have thoughts in my head that are negative, I'm like, all right, is this trying to steal, kill, or destroy anything in my life? Is it trying to kill a relationship, steal my joy, it destroy my, you know, anything, right? That if it's doing any of those three things, it's not from God. Whether people are saying that this is straight from God or not, God does not do anything that tries to steal, kill, or destroy. That is not in his nature. He is love. So I guess it's not easy. I'm not saying it just like magically happens, Holly. But I think the reconciling comes with really trying to, all right, who is God really? Yeah, I know what they said God was, but is that really who he was? Likely it's not. And, you know, like I said, easier said than done, but it is possible. And yeah, it is difficult to bring faith in a conversation with a survivor. Absolutely, Karen. And like I was saying earlier, it wasn't someone being like, you know, they heard my story as a survivor and they're like, oh, wow, you must be in pain. You should believe in God. Like, that'll totally save your life. Like, that's not what they said. And that's not like how we should approach really our conversations with survivors anyway. It really shows through our actions, that, you know, gosh, I think it's John 15, greater is no love than this, to lay down your life for your friends. You know, treat others as you want to be treated, right? That speaks volumes more than trying to preach God on someone will any day of the week. I will stay like, God uses us to be a light in the world to others. And we do that by being his image. And that, yeah, agree. Yes. Yeah. So I don't know. I feel like people try too hard to try to preach. And that, I hope that didn't feel like that today. That's not what I'm trying to do at all by any means. I just know that faith has absolutely played an important part in my healing, and I will not be, you know, I think it's important to address because I know I'm not alone in anything that I go through. And yeah, but it is difficult. I agree. Yeah, and I think honestly too, if the survivor wants to talk about it, they'll ask questions. Like, we just need to do our part in being good human beings and kind and loving. And if they want to bring faith into a conversation and take that deeper, like, they would ask. I asked. So yeah, I think we're just there to be someone that they can trust and show that we care. And that really is our most important job, to show them that we care and that we're there for them. Because I know most survivors don't believe that they have people that care and are there for them, unfortunately. Yeah. Any other questions?
Hi, I don't know if you guys can hear me. I just wanted to join the conversation because I assumed that obviously this would be either a Catholic or Christian perspective, and I am Muslim, and I completely identify with everything that was said today. I think, we go through life much more similarly than a lot of people believe. And even when I educate my youth or advocate for them and help them, I never want them to feel like because I'm a different religion that I'm judging their choices or that I can't help them. And so I just really appreciated the conversation today. It really did teach me a lot. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. And that's awesome. Yeah. We're a lot more alike than we realize most days, I think. All right. And that also speaks to the concept of unity, right? Like, I don't know, it just drives me nuts that we live in a world that's like so hyper focused on trying to figure out how we're different. And, anyway, I could go on a whole other tangent of that, but I won't. I wrote a book about it. Yeah. All right. Is that all?
Don't see anything else coming through. And give it just a moment. A lot of thank yous in case you didn't see that.
Yes, I see. Thank you. I appreciate it. I appreciate all your kindness too. This is very new to me, stepping into advocacy in this capacity. And I am quite honored to have this first opportunity to do so in my home state of Ohio, even though I abandoned and moved to Utah 7 years ago. I'm sorry, Ohio. But if you've ever seen the mountains, you'll understand why. Yeah.
Well, if there's nothing else, I think Javon will pop on in a moment and give you all your code words for the session. But I just wanted to say thank you, Emily, for being here today and presenting. We really appreciate you taking the time and hearing your perspective. It was great.
Awesome. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Yes, thank you so much, Emily. So we're about to head on to our next agenda. So we had a 15-minute break, but we are giving you the gift of time. So the next session does start at 3:15. You will go to oasv.org/2021 conference program and join the proper links for the workshop that you're wanting to go to. And the CEU code word is faith. I'll go ahead and drop that in the chat as well. It is faith.
Oh, and I guess, yeah, if anyone wants to like reach out to me or actually I had a slide. Let me share that. Awesome. Yes, if any of you would like to get a hold of me or connect with me, you can do so at the following. Social media wise, I'm probably the most active on Instagram at Emily Bernath Author. But I have a website as well, emilybernathauthor.com, Facebook, Twitter, you name it. I'm okay with, I think, pretty good with the most part for seeing my messages and replying. But yeah, if you guys would like to connect, follow, stay connected after the conference, I would more than love that. And yeah, I appreciate you all for giving me the time to speak here today.
Thank you again. And thank you again to all of our participants. We look forward to seeing you in our next session.
Awesome.
Bye, everybody.